In the heart of the Atlantic Ocean, where the waters stretch into infinite darkness and the waves crash with the force of ancient titans, something ancient and terrible was stirring. The storm had begun as a whisper on the horizon, a mere wisp of unsettled air that soon grew into a howling tempest, consuming everything in its path. As the winds howled and the waves climbed to monstrous heights, the sailors of the freighter Aurora huddled below deck, their faces pale with terror. The storm was unlike anything they had ever seen, its ferocity beyond any meteorological explanation. Lightning raged across the sky in jagged streaks, illuminating the roiling sea in brief, chaotic flashes. Captain Jonah Hart, a seasoned mariner with decades of experience, gripped the wheel with a white-knuckled intensity. His eyes, sharp and resolute, scanned the tumultuous horizon. He had heard legends of the Kraken, the mythical sea monster of ancient lore, but he had always dismissed them as sailors' tales. Now, however, he felt a deep, primal fear that suggested there was more to these tales than mere fantasy. "What in the name of all that's holy is happening out there?" he muttered, straining to make out anything beyond the tempest. The storm had taken on a life of its own. The sea churned as if a great force was battling beneath its surface, a force so immense that it disturbed the very fabric of nature. The freighter's crew was reduced to shouting over the deafening roar of the storm, their voices barely audible even through the constant cracking of thunder. Unbeknownst to them, the true source of their terror lay deep beneath the waves. Deep in the abyssal plains, far beyond the reach of light, the Kraken stirred from its slumber. For eons, it had slumbered in the depths, a colossal entity of tentacles and scales, its monstrous form barely a whisper in the grand tapestry of the ocean's abyss. Its eyes, ancient and wise, flickered open as it sensed a disturbance in its domain. It was a feeling not unlike waking from a deep, restless dream. The Kraken's senses were attuned to the vibrations of the ocean. It felt the force of a rival stirring, a power it had not encountered for millennia. The Leviathan, the other primordial sea creature, had also been disturbed from its own ancient rest. This was a being of legend as well, a serpent-like entity whose presence was said to bring tidal waves and chaos. The Kraken roared into the depths, a sound so deep and rumbling that it was felt rather than heard. It unfurled its massive tentacles, each one bristling with the sharpness of 1,000 years' worth of oceanic conflict. It could sense the Leviathan's approach, a powerful and unwelcome presence that had disrupted the natural order of its realm. The two titans of the deep had clashed before in epics long forgotten, their battles shaping the very landscape of the ocean floor. Their rivalry was as old as time itself, and now it seemed that fate had brought them together once more. As the Kraken began to rise, so too did the Leviathan. From the cold depths, the Leviathan's presence was felt as a dark shadow that blotted out the light of the few remaining stars. Its serpentine body twisted through the water with a grace that belied its enormous size. Its scales shimmered with a phosphorescent glow, casting eerie greenish light across the roiling waters. The ocean's surface began to bubble and froth as the two colossal beings drew closer. Their struggle was not just a clash of muscle and might, but a contest of primordial forces. Each strike of the Kraken's tentacles and each undulation of the Leviathan's coils sent shockwaves through the ocean, creating waves that towered high enough to reach the clouds. On the Aurora, the storm had reached its peak. The crew struggled to keep the ship afloat as it was tossed like a toy in the tempest's grasp. Lightning illuminated the massive waves that seemed to come from nowhere, smashing against the freighter's hull with a force that threatened to tear the vessel apart. Suddenly, a colossal wave, unlike any seen before, crashed into the Aurora. The ship was thrown into the air and then plunged back into the sea with a sickening thud. Water surged over the deck, and the ship's lights flickered wildly. The crew fought valiantly to secure the ship, but it was clear that nature was beyond their control. Captain Hart, bracing himself against the wheel, could scarcely believe the chaos unfolding around him. His mind raced as he tried to find a way to navigate through the storm, but it was clear that the storm was not merely a weather phenomenon. It was a manifestation of something far more sinister. The lightning revealed glimpses of the colossal forms beneath the waves. The Kraken's massive tentacles writhed in the water, their sheer size making them visible even through the chaotic foam. Opposite, the Leviathan's sinuous body coiled and twisted, its immense head emerging from the water in an eerie, almost malevolent way. The storm showed no signs of abating. If anything, it seemed to intensify with each passing moment. It was as though the Kraken and Leviathan were locked in a battle that threatened to consume the world above them. Captain Hart, peering through the rain and lightning, made a decision. "All hands on deck, brace for impact," he shouted over the roar of the storm. The crew, though terrified, moved with grim determination. They had no choice but to face the fury of the storm head-on. The ship creaked and groaned as it was lifted and thrown by the waves, and through it all, Captain Hart's thoughts were consumed by the realization that the legends were true. The Kraken and Leviathan were no mere myths. They were real, and their battle was wreaking havoc on the world above. In the depths, the struggle between the Kraken and Leviathan reached a fever pitch. Each combatant unleashed its full power, causing the very ocean to heave and convulse. The clash of their immense forms created whirlpools that threatened to swallow entire fleets, and the shockwaves from their blows sent tsunamis crashing onto distant shores. As the Kraken and Leviathan's titanic clash continued beneath the waves, the world above was thrust into chaos. Coastal cities on both sides of the Atlantic were battered by relentless storms. The once familiar weather patterns were now completely disrupted, and meteorologists were baffled by the severity of the conditions. Rain fell in torrents, and hurricanes roared with a fury that seemed to come from the very heart of the ocean. In New York City, the skyline was obscured by a swirling maelstrom of dark clouds. Floodwaters surged through the streets, swallowing cars and buildings. Emergency services struggled to keep up with the ever-growing disaster. People huddled in shelters, glued to news reports that hinted at something far worse than just a severe storm. Local officials are urging residents to stay indoors and avoid any unnecessary travel. The news anchor's voice trembled as the camera shook with the force of the wind. Meteorologists have no explanation for the intensity of these storms, but there are reports of unprecedented wave heights and oceanic turbulence. The anchor's words were drowned out by the roar of the storm. As the people of the city looked out their windows at the torrential downpour, few could imagine the true source of their plight, a cataclysmic struggle beneath the ocean's surface. Deep in the ocean, the Kraken and Leviathan were locked in a battle that shook the very foundations of the earth. The Leviathan's serpentine form lashed out with powerful swipes of its tail, sending shockwaves through the water. The Kraken retaliated with its formidable tentacles, each movement sending ripples of energy that disturbed the ocean's depths. The underwater terrain was transformed into a battleground. Mountains of silt and rock were upheaved by their combat, and volcanic vents spewed plumes of molten rock and gas. The ocean floor, once a stable and serene expanse, now resembled a chaotic war zone. The Kraken's great eye, a glimmering orb of primal rage, focused on its rival. The Leviathan's eyes glowed with an eerie, bioluminescent light, casting an unsettling greenish hue over the battlefield. The two creatures, ancient and mighty, clashed with a force that defied comprehension. Each blow they exchanged was felt as tremors by those on the surface. The monstrous waves and unrelenting storms were mere echoes of the true conflict beneath. As the Kraken's tentacles wrapped around the Leviathan's sinuous body, the Leviathan coiled and writhed, seeking to free itself from its rival's grasp. As the Kraken and Leviathan fought on, their battle began to escalate. The once deep and dark oceanic abyss was now lit by the bright flashes of their struggle. The very water was being torn apart, creating chasms that threatened to swallow entire continents. In the heart of the storm, Captain Jonah Hart and the remaining crew of the Aurora fought against the forces of nature. The ship had been battered and nearly torn apart by the storm's fury, but they were determined to survive. They had managed to make some repairs, but their situation remained dire. Through the violent rain and crashing waves, Captain Hart saw something that nearly made him lose his grip on reality. In the fleeting moments of lightning, he glimpsed the colossal forms of the Kraken and Leviathan, their immense bodies writhing and clashing with each other. The sight was both awe-inspiring and horrifying, a reminder of how small and insignificant human endeavors could be in the face of such ancient powers. As the ship lurched violently, Hart's first mate, Linda Thompson, shouted over the cacophony, "Captain, we need to get out of here. We can't withstand this for much longer." Hart nodded grimly. "We need to find a safe harbor. We're caught in the middle of something far beyond our control." They fought their way through the storm, trying to navigate through the turbulent waters. Every time they thought they had found a momentary calm, a new wave or gust of wind would remind them of the chaos that lay just beyond. Far beneath the storm-tossed surface, the Kraken and Leviathan's battle reached its zenith. The Kraken's tentacles, massive and lined with razor-sharp barbs, coiled around the Leviathan's serpentine body. The Leviathan struggled, its scales shimmering with a fierce light as it attempted to free itself. Their struggle was a symphony of destruction, each movement sending ripples through the oceanic expanse. The very sea seemed to roar with their anger, and volcanic activity on the ocean floor surged as the forces of nature were pushed to their limits. In their battle, they inadvertently triggered seismic events. The tectonic plates beneath them shifted, causing earthquakes that further disturbed the ocean. The resulting tsunamis surged across the globe, causing widespread devastation far from the battleground. The Kraken, sensing an opportunity, tightened its grip, attempting to subdue the Leviathan. But the Leviathan was no less determined. It unleashed a surge of bioluminescent energy, an ethereal light that momentarily illuminated the depths, and pushed back against the Kraken's assault. As the storm continued to wreak havoc above, scientists and meteorologists were struggling to understand the unprecedented events. Theories ranged from unusual atmospheric phenomena to outright supernatural occurrences. However, no explanation could fully account for the severity of the storms and the oceanic disturbances. In an underground research facility in London, Dr. Emma Carter, a renowned oceanographer, was working with her team to analyze the data. They had detected massive underwater disturbances and seismic activity, but could not make sense of the full picture. "We need to get more data on these underwater phenomena," Dr. Carter said, her voice tinged with urgency. "Something is happening beneath the ocean that is beyond our comprehension." Her team worked feverishly, trying to piece together the puzzle. The evidence pointed to a massive conflict beneath the surface, but the scale of the destruction was staggering. As the storm raged on, Dr. Carter realized that their understanding of the ocean's depths and the legends surrounding them was being tested like never before. The world watched in fear and anticipation, each new update adding to the sense of impending doom. As the Kraken and Leviathan continued their ancient struggle, humanity could only hope that the battle would soon come to an end, and that the world's battered surface could begin to recover. The storms above grew more violent with each passing hour. Coastal cities around the world were reeling from the impacts. New York was submerged, London streets were flooding, and Sydney was battered by unprecedented waves. The fury of nature seemed unrelenting, as if the world itself was being reshaped by the primal clash beneath the ocean's surface. In the middle of this chaos, Captain Jonah Hart and the remaining crew of the Aurora found themselves adrift in a sea of madness. The ship had been heavily damaged, but they had managed to navigate to a calmer stretch of water, at least temporarily. Hart stared out into the tempest, his face etched with exhaustion and determination. "We need to get closer to the epicenter of this chaos," he said to Linda Thompson, who stood beside him. "If we can understand what's causing this, we might find a way to stop it." Linda nodded, though her eyes betrayed her fear. "The closer we get, the more dangerous it becomes. But if there's any chance we can help, we have to take it." With a resolve born of necessity, Hart steered the battered vessel towards the heart of the storm, where the disturbances seemed to be most intense. The sea's surface was a maelstrom of towering waves and swirling clouds, making navigation treacherous. The crew worked tirelessly to keep the ship afloat, battling against the elements as they inched closer to the source of the chaos. Beneath the storm-tossed waters, the Kraken and Leviathan's battle had reached a climactic moment. The Leviathan, though massive and powerful, was beginning to show signs of wear. Its scales were scraped and torn, and its movements were becoming slower as it struggled against the Kraken's relentless assault. The Kraken, with its immense size and strength, had gained the upper hand. Its tentacles tightened around the Leviathan's serpentine form, attempting to subdue it. The Leviathan's bioluminescent glow flickered erratically, casting eerie shadows across the ocean floor. The Kraken roared in triumph, a sound that reverberated through the depths. The Leviathan, however, was far from finished. It summoned a final surge of energy, its eyes blazing with a desperate resolve. With a tremendous effort, it unleashed a shockwave of bioluminescent power that surged through the Kraken's tentacles, forcing the beast to release its grip. The shockwave caused an underwater eruption, sending plumes of superheated water and volcanic ash into the surrounding waters. The ocean floor trembled, and the sea itself seemed to convulse with the impact. The Kraken and Leviathan, though battered, were still locked in a deadly struggle, their battle now taking on a new, more violent dimension. Back on the Aurora, Captain Hart and his crew were fighting to keep the ship steady. The closer they got to the epicenter of the chaos, the more intense the storms became. The ship was buffeted by waves that seemed to rise from nowhere, and lightning streaked across the sky with increasing frequency. Linda Thompson, trying to steady herself against the lurching deck, called out, "Captain, we're going to lose the ship if we don't find a way to stabilize ourselves." Hart, his face grim, nodded. "We need to understand what's causing this storm. If we can find the source of the disturbance, maybe we can figure out a way to stop it." Their instruments were barely functioning due to the extreme conditions, but they could still sense the tremendous energy emanating from beneath the waves. Hart knew that they were getting closer to the source of the chaos, closer to the epicenter of the Kraken and Leviathan's ancient conflict. The battle beneath the waves had entered its final, desperate phase. The Kraken and Leviathan were locked in a brutal struggle, their forms twisting and turning in the murky depths. Each creature unleashed its full power, creating underwater earthquakes and volcanic eruptions that shook the very foundations of the ocean. The Kraken, in its anger and frustration, lashed out with a devastating barrage of tentacles. The Leviathan, weakened but undeterred, retaliated with a series of powerful tail strikes and energy blasts. Their struggle was a cataclysmic event that seemed to threaten the very stability of the ocean's depths. As the Leviathan's strength waned, it summoned a final, desperate surge of energy. With a powerful roar, it unleashed a wave of bioluminescent energy that surged through the Kraken's body, forcing it to release its grip. The Leviathan, though battered and exhausted, managed to retreat into the deeper recesses of the ocean, seeking refuge from its relentless foe. The Kraken, enraged and injured, roared after the retreating Leviathan. Its tentacles flailed in frustration, causing further underwater eruptions and disturbances. The ocean seemed to quake with the Kraken's fury as it sought to reassert its dominance. On the surface, the storm began to show signs of abating. The once turbulent waters were slowly beginning to calm, and the winds began to subside. The Aurora, battered but still afloat, finally found a brief moment of respite. Captain Hart and his crew, though exhausted, were relieved to see the storm's fury lessening. The ship had survived the worst of it, and they had managed to reach a temporary calm spot. The crew looked out over the still choppy waters, their faces marked by a mix of relief and uncertainty. Linda Thompson approached Captain Hart, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think the storm will continue, or is this the end of it?" Hart shook his head. "The Kraken and Leviathan's battle isn't over. It's possible that their struggle has only paused. We need to understand more about what's happening below the surface. If their conflict continues, we might face more storms and chaos." The crew began to assess the damage to the ship and make necessary repairs. While the immediate threat of the storm seemed to be over, the knowledge that the ancient titans still clashed beneath the waves cast a shadow over their relief. In the depths of the ocean, the Leviathan had retreated to its hidden lair, an ancient underwater cavern where it could heal and recover. The Kraken, still seething with rage, prowled the surrounding waters, its massive form a dark, menacing presence. As the Leviathan rested, it contemplated the ancient pact that had once kept their conflict in check. Legend spoke of a time when the Kraken and Leviathan had agreed to a truce, a pact that had maintained a fragile balance in the ocean's depths. It was clear that this pact had been broken, and the consequences were evident in the chaos that had engulfed the world above. The Leviathan knew that to restore balance, it would need to seek a new truce or find a way to end the conflict once and for all. But such a task would require more than mere strength. It would require cunning, diplomacy, and an understanding of ancient forces that had long been forgotten. The world, reeling from the effects of the storms, was beginning to come to terms with the scale of the disaster. Nations mobilized to provide aid to the affected regions, and scientists and experts worked tirelessly to understand the unprecedented weather patterns and oceanic disturbances. In the aftermath of the storms, Dr. Emma Carter and her team made a breakthrough. They had analyzed seismic data and underwater disturbances, and it became clear that the source of the chaos was an ancient conflict between two colossal sea creatures. Their findings were shared with the public, and while the news was met with a mix of disbelief and awe, it provided some understanding of the events that had transpired. The Kraken and Leviathan are not just myths, Dr. Carter explained in a press conference. They are ancient beings whose struggle has had a direct impact on our world. We must understand their conflict to prevent future disasters. The world's focus shifted to the depths of the ocean, and efforts were made to monitor and mitigate the effects of the ongoing conflict. The hope was that by understanding the nature of the battle between the Kraken and Leviathan, humanity could find a way to restore balance and prevent further catastrophes. As the storms above began to wane, the world's focus turned towards recovery and understanding. Coastal cities began to rebuild, and scientists worked feverishly to prepare for any future disturbances. But deep beneath the ocean's surface, the Kraken and Leviathan's conflict was far from over. The Leviathan, though battered and weakened, had retreated to its ancient lair to heal and regain its strength. It was a serpentine titan of immense power, and its determination to end the conflict with the Kraken was unwavering. The Leviathan's lair, a labyrinthine network of underwater caves and tunnels, glowed with bioluminescent light as the creature restored its energies. In the heart of its sanctuary, the Leviathan consulted the ancient knowledge inscribed on the walls of its lair. The ancient texts spoke of a time when the Titan's conflict had nearly destroyed the world, and the Leviathan knew that to end the strife, it needed to rekindle the ancient pact that had once kept the peace. Meanwhile, the Kraken continued to rage through the depths, its anger fueled by its recent defeat. It roamed the ocean floor, its massive tentacles leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The Kraken was determined to assert its dominance, to crush the Leviathan and claim control over the ocean's depths once more. The Leviathan emerged from its lair, its massive form undulating through the water with renewed strength. The underwater disturbances had lessened, but the tension in the ocean was palpable. The Leviathan was ready for the final confrontation, prepared to end the ancient conflict once and for all. The Kraken sensed the approach of its rival and roared defiantly. The ocean trembled as the two titans prepared for their ultimate clash. The Kraken's massive tentacles lashed out, each strike causing underwater tremors that sent shockwaves through the ocean. The Leviathan responded with powerful swipes of its tail and surges of bioluminescent energy, creating bursts of light and heat that illuminated the darkness of the deep. Their battle was an awe-inspiring display of primal force, each creature unleashing its full might in a desperate bid for victory. The Kraken's tentacles wrapped around the Leviathan, attempting to restrain it, while the Leviathan's serpentine body coiled and twisted, using its agility to evade and strike back. The ocean floor convulsed with the impact of their clash. Volcanic vents erupted, spewing molten rock and gas into the surrounding waters. The very sea seemed to writhe with the energy of their struggle, as if the ocean itself was a battleground. Despite its ferocity, the Kraken was beginning to show signs of exhaustion. The Leviathan's bioluminescent energy continued to surge, its strength growing as it harnessed the power of its ancient knowledge. The Leviathan's strikes became more precise, its movements more fluid and graceful. The Kraken's massive tentacles, though powerful, were growing sluggish. The Leviathan took advantage of this, delivering a series of powerful blows that left the Kraken reeling. The Leviathan's energy surged to its peak, a blinding light filling the depths as it unleashed a final, devastating attack. The Kraken roared in pain and fury as the Leviathan's energy engulfed it. The light of the Leviathan's attack was so intense that it pierced through the water, casting an eerie glow that reached the surface. The Kraken's massive form thrashed violently, but it was clear that the Leviathan's power was overwhelming. With a final, agonized roar, the Kraken's immense body began to collapse. Its tentacles flailed and its once mighty form sank to the ocean floor, defeated. The Leviathan, though weary, remained resolute as it watched the Kraken's form disappear into the depths. With the Kraken vanquished, the ocean's depths slowly began to settle. The seismic disturbances and underwater eruptions ceased, and the violent storms on the surface gradually abated. The world watched with a mixture of relief and awe as the chaos that had consumed the seas began to subside. The Leviathan, though victorious, remained vigilant. It had restored a semblance of balance to the ocean's depths, but it knew that the ancient pact needed to be reinforced. The Leviathan retreated to its lair, where it would work to ensure that the peace was maintained and that no further conflict would arise. Dr. Emma Carter and her team, analyzing the data from the aftermath of the battle, could see the changes in the ocean's behavior. The violent storms had ceased, and the seismic activity had returned to normal levels. The world was slowly recovering from the disaster, but the understanding of the ancient forces at play had forever changed humanity's perspective on the ocean. The Kraken and Leviathan's conflict has ended, Dr. Carter explained in a final briefing. The Leviathan has emerged victorious, and the ocean's balance has been restored. It is our hope that this peace will be maintained and that humanity can continue to learn from the mysteries of the deep. The world began to rebuild, and the memories of the storm's fury slowly faded. The oceans, once again calm, were a testament to the power and majesty of the ancient creatures that dwelled beneath the surface. The Leviathan's victory had brought an end to an ancient conflict, and with it, a fragile hope for a more stable and harmonious world. Years passed, and the story of the Kraken and Leviathan became legend, a tale told by sailors and scientists alike. The ocean remained a place of mystery and wonder, its depths hiding secrets that would continue to inspire and intrigue. The Leviathan, now a symbol of ancient power and wisdom, watched over the ocean's depths, ensuring that the balance was maintained. Though the Kraken was gone, its legacy lived on in the tales of those who had witnessed its final struggle. The world above, having weathered the storm and witnessed the clash of titans, moved forward with a renewed sense of respect for the ocean's mysteries. The ancient legends of the Kraken and Leviathan served as a reminder of the forces that lay hidden beneath the waves and the need to respect and protect the natural world. And so, as the waves lapped gently against the shores and the storms receded into memory, the ocean continued to hold its secrets, forever shaped by the epic battle of its ancient guardians.